Hey, everybody, this is Fernando Labastida here with Linh Nguyen again in another episode of Linh Talks Tech, where Linh talks about everything related to how the IT department is going and what IT departments need to do to become more efficient, more agile, and how to solve the problems of the business quicker than anything else. So, Linh, I really wanted to get into something that I think you and I have been thinking about, at least I've been thinking about, and that is the future of the IT department. How do you see things in the IT department changing from now until about 2030, 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think IT is still very grounded in manual processes, unfortunately. I'll tell you a story. I think last Friday, as people started, their weekends, and I was about to as well, kick back after about 6 p.m. Pacific time. I had a frantic call from a customer, a managed service provider, and they kind of like in a panic, I guess, ran out of options and called me to see if I can hop on a call. And I was like, well, what's going on? And they said, well, production's down, or they can't transact, or they something, or, it's bad. CIO's on the call. I'm like, okay, great. So that's the kind of call you get. You don't want to get actually on a Friday evening. And I'm just an advisor. I'm not the IT guy sitting there trying to solve. And I don't know how many hours they've been on this problem before they call me, because nobody want to look bad when
Yeah.
there's an issue. But if you banging it for hours and you don't know what happened, and you have no clue what to do next to get back to service, it's a sad story, right? I mean, CIO shouldn't be sitting on this call, right? But anyway, I'm not going to get into too much detail that we're revealing, but essentially what you have here is when this situation happens, everybody's on the phone. They got the vendor software on the phone. They got the service provider on the phone. They've got, obviously the CIO, all his operation. He's got application team. He's got everything on there. Yet the story is about the same, meaning like everyone, imagine you got pulled into this meeting, and I don't know how many people would they cycle through before they got a hold of me, but I don't have access to the system, right? I'm like, I could probably tell you what's wrong if I had access to data that could tell me a story, because most problem have a storyline. People like to look at a problem as something happened, but the team on there try to explain, tell the story. And I said, well, what exactly happened? When did it happen? The question for me is always the same. Like everything, there's a normal state, and then there's something that broke. Somewhere in between, there's a story. Can you tell me, like in the movie, you don't watch the ending and guess what the beginning was like,
No.
right? You kind of have to, like the producer and the director and the writer, they have to work together to tell the story in a useful manner so that you get the complete story. And then you kind of like, oh yeah, who's the villain, who's the hero. Well, on these calls, when there are, obviously business impact, and we talked about this in the past, every hour is X amount of millions of dollars, depending on the size of the company. Yet when you get on, everyone who came on would need to be told a story. But then who's telling the story? Depending on who's telling the story, they have their angle. And then you get 20 angles. And
Well,
it's,
it's like the game of telephone. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like you instead of solving the problem with a solution, you're getting multiple. You feel like you are a detective now. You're trying to figure out, well, this person's saying something, this person's saying something, this person's saying something. So which one of these is fact and which one of these is, just preponderance and projection? So what I say in the original question where IT is at, I think IT is broken. I think the real storytelling needs to come from data, and data itself is valuable. And that's why you have, I said I won't talk about AI, but there is machine learning, right? The reason data is important is because it tells a story. It's not biased. If you collect enough data, there's a storyline. Yes, there could be, two separate endings or multiple things happening. There could be multiple stories, but not 20 stories. So data itself need to become the center of IT. And like the business uses data to drive their decision making, right? You have like How much should I order to produce, to manufacture, to sell based on my purchase requisitions, my pipeline, my supply logistics, my demand generation? Business uses data all the time to make business decisions. But IT doesn't use this data. And you know how much data the system produce? The system produce a lot more data than business people, right?
Right.
So think about this problem multiplied by the nth hundredth degree. And if you're not using data-driven approach to reach your decision about what happened, you are essentially creating bias. So in IT, we want to say, I want to make the right decision. I want to draw conclusion based on root cause analysis. And using data-driven approach, you deduce, you use algorithms to drive what is the likelihood of something happening, because you have all these effects. These effects are caused by some underlying root cause.
And you're talking about predictive analytics, right?
Yeah, we're talking about using data to drive analytics. You drive here's what happened, and here's are the likely, candidates that cause this problem, and what are the possible remedies. So now with data and with compute, you can take this data and say, give me, 3 possible outcomes.
Mhm.
Right? If I tweak this, what happens here? I tweak this, what happened here? I tweak this, what happened here? So that's one side. I want to say future of IT is it has to be data driven, not so much subjective to the experience of people on the phone just to like guess what's happening. Because again, that is just a matter of opinion. And then so you would like data to tell the story. And then once data tells the story, you can leap ahead and say, well, the possible remedies are this, this, this. Can I take this piece of information and simulate? Right? It's like you send NASA astronauts to space.
Yeah.
You can't predict every scenario, but whatever you can predict from your model, you have to simulate in a lab. You simulate in a virtual world so that you know the possible outcomes and prepare for them, right? So the idea is to prepare for as many outcomes as possible. That helps you make the decision faster, because that delay in making the decision means that you are either guessing, making the wrong decision, wasting more time, more downtime, more money, versus having like maybe 2 or 3 options that already have predictive outcome, and then you drive that. And so automation comes into play, because if you want to simulate something, you have to automate, right? Because what happened is, let's say I needed to instantiate um, a lab environment where I could simulate this problem real quick.
Mhm.
If you don't have that today and you have to manually create it, well, it takes too long to simulate. So you can't play what if. To play what if, you have to be able to say, I need to throw this problem into a lab, maybe, and for example, take a system, a production system that's this problem is happening. If you don't have a lab environment, what if I could clone the system, automate, inflate it in an hour, and have this system available for me to test my theory before impacting or taking down production environment to try these things. Right? Nobody wants to try and error in production. But unfortunately, this is exactly what happened with this one customer, because they really didn't have any place to simulate what would happen if you try this. They just had to try it in production, which is not
Uh-huh.
ideal. There were times where an action, like for instance, I want to shut this down, maybe, like the old Windows. Why don't we go for reboot, right?
Yeah.
Customers are so like rushed to like, because they don't have an option. They don't want to look like they're not doing anything. And say,
Yeah.
okay, let's reboot. Maybe it'll clear away. I'm like, this is not Windows. It's not your desktop, right? This is enterprise. Rebooting takes a long time, especially done manually. And this customer was doing things manually with 3 or 4 people on the line to take one system down.
Yeah.
And in the end, I said, well, it's not going to help. You can do it just to make feel good, but it's not going to help. And of course, they didn't help. They did it anyway. But that
Mhm.
burned like about 30 minutes of activity with like 3 or 4 people. So the automation becomes important. If you were to do this, and yet automation, you could do it in 5 minutes, right? Push a few buttons and let it do it, right? The same thing with automation. Pilots can always land, like you talk about astronauts. They can always have the autopilot mode have the astronaut like manually dock. But why do they do like automation? Why do they put on autopilot to dock? Because it's precise, right?
Right.
You train the system on data, you automate it, you simulate it, And when it comes down to it, you let it do, and you're sitting there in case something go wrong, you overtake the action. That's why I think in IT, I see the future having to be scaled tremendously, more compute, more storage, more networks, more complex applications. You have to use automation to manage. Even if you manage 50% of what you deploy, through automation and using that approach, you're much better off, right? And some part you can like, okay, I'll overtake from here. Autopilot did 70% of the work, and I'll do the pilot manual, the 30%, right?
Right.
You can scale much better than just saying, I'm going to do everything manually because I don't have any other solution. So I think that's my take on like IT. That's scratching the surface. Obviously, how
Yeah.
do you get there? How do you automate? How you use more data driven approach? That's the whole investment. You
Yeah.
don't do that overnight.
And I was going to ask you, like, what are the 3, 5, 7, 10 steps, or maybe the 2 steps
Mhm.
that an IT department needs to do starting from now to to prepare for the future, to prepare for this scenario that you're talking about? What are the things that the steps that IT departments need to do now to prepare for the future?
Yeah, I'd say I'll continue with the data, right? If you're not having a central system to manage your data, it's kind of like having employees on 5 different HR systems. Okay, it's like, yeah, this we have to log. I don't know what this user or this employee, what their history or background is, and then I have to. So all companies, when they buy another company, what do? You merge, and then you're supposed to save in the merge by consolidating your systems. That means like if I'm a 10,000 employee company and I purchase a 5,000 employee company, I should merge my HR database so that I have 15,000. And I can't have two, but a lot of companies do this. They merge and they just stay like, because they don't they don't put in the effort to. So merchant acquisitions in the finance business, in the financial market, is talked a lot on efficiencies. But I tell you what, IT people know when you buy merge, IT people end up with the work and they're never given the budget, the time to actually integrate the systems properly, right? So that you have a single source of truth. So in IT, I'd say first thing they do is they need to have a single source of truth, whether it's a consolidated IT environment where there's a central, security, there's central data store, there's a central tooling for observability, there's a central orchestration, automation. All of this has to work together. If you just start growing by buying more tools and or acquiring companies with more tools and never actually reduce it, it's never going to solve the problem. Again, you could be on a call with 20 people and everybody's looking at different panes of glasses. So you can't arrive at a data-driven decision because you don't have that kind of a succinct point of view. So you're just having disjuncted silo stuff. So I think IT needs to, first of all, budget for this. It's not something, they tend to be too reactive, right? I'm going to implement something because the business asked for it. But when do you implement something because you need it for yourself? This is the breakdown, right? If IT doesn't spend the time, the energy to improve its own internal systems, and you're just improving or implementing applications for the end users because, maybe they're paying. But IT itself, being a cost center, I see is a problem. It has to be able to generate value for the end business, but first saying that I need to implement systems of structure, systems of single source of truth in terms of data driven. I always talk about monitor, manage, automate, orchestrate, right? Because you have to be able to know what you got. And if you don't monitor, you don't know what you got. And if you monitor using 20 different, systems, you don't have the single point where everything is on one time scale, right? It's like having an alarm system from 3 different alarm company, and when an event happens, a burglar breaks in, and you're like, well, which alarm is going off, and which company do I call? Which happened first? Did they break in the window and then they got into my bedroom? Which happened? If it's just simple things like that, first of all, consolidate your data. Once you have the data consolidated, then you can put in processes to observe for anomaly and put in processes for When there's a problem, you follow the data, right? Yeah, not people, but follow the data. What does the data tell you? So that is in a reactive mode, but when you're in proactive mode, the data will always tell you. Like, for instance, I'm growing at this pace. I'm running out of this resource. I detect anomaly because somebody deployed something and it makes the system act weird, right?
Right.
If you're using this approach, you always know what's coming up based on historical patterns, what is normal, what's not normal, right? You can eliminate, I'd say, 80% of the noise by just being able to focus on a data approach, which has all applications, all databases report into a single store, even though they might come from different places, different times, different geography, even different technology. You can centralize this data.
You mean
Once
like
you
in a data
centralize,
lake, a central data lake,
yeah, I
or?
mean, just think about data lake or database, just talk about database, right? If you have a database, you don't just have a database to store business data. You can have a database to store IT data, right?
Mhm.
I have to know more about every single application, the metadata about it. What does this application do? How is it related to another application? What is the sequence for bringing down this application, or what is the sequence of bringing it up? And all of these dependency information is important, because a lot of people say, I have monitor data. Yes, I agree, you have it. Most companies have it, but they are so siloed. You have to get on that box, and you have no visibility outside of that, where it relates, who it talks to, what is in the sequence of the process that this asset, this IT asset, becomes important.
Yeah.
So it's a network effect. If I break this down, if this thing's slow, what is impacted, right? This thing's break, what process breaks? I
Mhm.
should be able to, and again, I was on the call with the CIOs, like, what happened if I take this one down, or who's impacted? They were trying to figure out like what user are impacted, who to call and alert them that, business is impacted. That stuff, communication is impacted. Everything is impacted when you don't have this clear, um, topographic kind of picture of your environment.
Topographic kind of picture. That's really interesting analogy.
Uh-huh.
Right. And so that actually kind of begs the question, or makes me think of the question, what kind of silos typically exist within IT departments? Like, um,
Yeah, so let's say, and everybody knows the term DevOps, right? And the DevOps is was like the magical term maybe 10 years ago, and people are like, oh, DevOps. And so developers typically develop applications, and then operation people deal with operations, and then they say, well, they need to be like merged into DevOps, but it works funnily enough, completely that opposite way, right? People tend to stay in their lanes. Developer like to stay in the lane. They don't want to go into operations. It's like asking a developer, an application developer, to work weekends to do, shift support. They don't like that. They're just like, I just develop and I hand it off to somebody else to support production, right? So this is what happens when there's a problem. And then problem comes, and then, oh, something's broke. And then they go, wow, and then get the application team on and figure out like, did they do something? Did they deploy something? Did they deploy code? Did they configure something that broke this? Right. So first of all, there's a lot of finger pointing between teams. I say that there is, without merging these people, because like I say, DevOps try to do this by changing people and say, hey, these developers can automate the code deployment and blah blah blah. People don't want to cross teams and do 10 things. They just want to focus on what they're good at. So how do you solve this problem? DevOps today is still a problem. It didn't solve the overall issue. It may solve like 20% of types of applications. But what needs to happen is that all these teams can collaborate more efficiently. So how did they do that, right? So application team, the operations team, the IT analyst, the database admin, the system admin, the cloud admin, the business service manager, all of these people need to be on one platform to see the impact. So for instance, if you had a change because you want to promote the code you just wrote that's been tested, this code eventually will be supported by operations. So they need to see the visibility of this change. So what we were talking about last time was the event about change automation intelligence, right? So the one type of change is development, right? So code. It's not the only type. There's many other types we talked about. But let's say these teams, if working together, can visualize what the change is, who needs to test it, what is the outcome in order for it to be promoted, who's going to review that and approve that to be moved into some environment. If these were all visible steps in order for it to end up in a production state, then it's important to have all these teams collaborate and not saying this thing is automatically deployed because of DevOps. DevOps does not solve the problem. I'm sorry to say all the people who believe in DevOps and saying all that, it's just another tool, another thing. I have application friends, development friends, DevOps friends, and they do not want to support production on weekends. So stop trying to get your app guy to support because they have ability to deploy code or whatever, right? Production operation is a different discipline.
Yeah.
And so that the same thing that later on they say, okay, maybe we call sys DevOps. I'm like, well, what is sys DevOps? I mean, the system guy, who does like system engineering, they optimize how systems run. They get pulled into DevOps. Now they got sys DevOps. Now one guy's got 3 different responsibilities. And then they layer on top after that, sec DevOps, security dev. So these terms, IT people like to create industry to make a buzz, to give a title to something.
Yeah.
But the really fundamental issue is that you need a collaboration from a solution that brings together people, binds together process, and support via platform that drives the team forward. It's not to create this new buzzword of something. At the end of the day, it doesn't solve the problem, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think it still come down to that IT lacks, to me, the right approach in solution. So solution design, solution engineering has to take an engineering approach, not slap together after the fact that, and then say, you support this. And because without the right solution, you don't have a digital knowledge base. You don't have a way to have real-time information to everything from deployment to support to ticketing to root cause analysis to documenting or providing reporting dashboards to management. I love it how we talked about some of our enemy out there.
Right.
In terms of like who's out there causing more problem than they're solving. To me, those are the enemy, right? If we're trying to create a solution and there's people out there trying to sell tools or slapping together huge implementation plans with a lot of resources to configure, install, manage these tools, to me, they're the enemy because they're just creating additional revenue for something that should exist as a solution and focus on delivering the value to the customer quickly, right? So let's say I'm to vendor A and there's 2 vendor B, and each of them say, I need 12 weeks to, install and configure this and then train you to use this, blah, blah, blah. And 12 weeks later, the customer comes and say, I have this problem, the one on Friday, huh? How would you solve this? And they're like, we didn't configure for that. We need 3 guys for 2 weeks to configure that scenario. And so on and so forth. And all the new scenario that comes along becomes like a lot of money, a lot of time, and it's still not delivering it. Whereas if I'm delivering a tool like a SaaS platform that's readily available, let's say after 1 week,
Right.
for them to, okay. And then I set it in motion and I have a way to configure as much as I can out of the box, use it, and then have an easy way to customize additional solutions based on the need, turn around and say, all of this within 4 weeks, I'll be the same place these guys at 12 weeks. I spend about 1/3 of the budget. And then the customer can say, well, this not do what I wanted. I want this, I want that. Well, you're only 3 or 4 weeks into it, right? It's much easier to say, yeah, I can accommodate that request. Give me, 48 hours, a week, whatever. You're not 12 weeks down the line and still have something that doesn't work for you.
Yeah. The whole sunk cost situation.
Yeah. And I see this as the problem why IT is behind, because they're fearful of new tools. Like I say, new tools are not the solver of the problem. The solution should be. So if you're just implementing tools for the sake of, like, I got this tool from XYZ because I heard it at some conference, or they had some executive dinner, and they sold it to my CIO, and I got it. And at 12 weeks in, I'm still not getting what I want. That's the wrong approach. The approach should be something quickly, get it on. If you see a demo and you see a feature you like, that feature should turn on in about a week. You use it and you don't like it, you can customize it. Like a week later, you're up and running with something you actually really need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say enemy, I see a whole industry out there. I see a lot of system integrator, global system integrator SIs. They are reseller. So how does that benefit? They are pitching a tool to the customer for their benefit to implement, to charge
Instead of
consulting.
providing a solution.
Yeah. So they're getting the money from the resale. They're getting the money from consulting, right? But they're not like going out every time this happens and say, you know what? I don't sell tool. I sell solution, and I know these vendors best of breed for this area, and I can bring them in and solve them quickly and drive a solution. That's the right approach.
Yeah. It's like
So,
pharmaceutical companies sending pharmaceutical sales reps to the doctor's offices and
mhm,
convincing the doctors to
mhm,
prescribe their medication, even though it may
mhm.
not necessarily be the right solution for a patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think IT could move a lot faster if they streamline the way that they approach problem and solution, and identify who. And when I say enemy, it's not enemy of my company, my solution, although it could be. But the enemy, I think, really the enemy of the customer.
Right. Right.
Instead of solving their problem, they are just increasing the cost and the time and making it more fuzzy. So to the point where IT people fear new tool.
Yeah.
Right? If I work for a company and I just get thrown new tools all the time to implement, install, configure, right? It's never ending. Like I said, I don't want more work. I want something automated, less work, gets up running quickly, and I can be the user. I should dictate what it needs to do, and it gets done. Very little fuss or overhead. I think the industry has caused this issue for IT itself, right? Why IT is not getting the budget, because it's overblown on fat vendors, I guess,
Tools.
and then even fatter system integrators,
Mm-hmm.
consulting companies, what have you.
I like that.
It's
Fat
causes.
vendors and fatter system integrators.
Mhm,
Yeah. So we talked about two steps now for the IT department to
mhm,
prepare for the
mhm,
future, right? Number one
mhm,
is consolidating on a single source of the truth,
mhm,
right? Having all the data consolidated instead of having it in different silos. Number two is really providing solutions and
mhm,
not succumbing to these vendors who just all they want to do is sell tools, and you have all this mishmash of tools, right?
mhm.
But what's another step that IT departments should do to
Yeah, something
modernize?
tangible, realistic is, I see this failure a lot in the industry as well, is that the customers' IT department are not held to accountability with a measurable set of KPIs. And we talk about service level agreements with the end user. So the business has a service level agreement with or the IT has a service level agreement with its vendors, right? But today, a lot of that are just legal documents. They're not in any way, shape, or form something that, like I say, when there's a problem, there should be something on a dashboard somewhere saying, hey, you breached this service level because either I'm down, or I'm not performing, whatever. This service level needs to be in a way to keep everybody honest, just like the same way, we talk about, let's just talk about government, right? You have policy makers, lawmakers, you have judges, and you have the law enforcers. They work together to enforce laws. So what's the point if I create laws I can't enforce? And that's what SLA are. If you create it and you're not monitoring it, there's not enforcement for it. So if I say and I give example, if my service level says I shall not be down longer than 2 hours in any given month for an outage, something like that, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And then there is some penalty clause for that, whether it's internal, whether it's external, whatever. Would you like to know that, this is tracked, and then when they're down, the time is ticking. Everybody knows the importance of this. They need to drive everybody to the same beat where, there's penalty, there's compliance and all that. And then, so It doesn't have to be so dramatic like an airline where, we had the major holiday weekend, airline system went down, everybody can't travel. It's very visible, right? And they got delayed for hours and days, and then there's a backlog causing all kinds of traffic nightmare. Imagine if you had this internally to your organization where you say any type of impact, any kind of system issue, or any type of proactive thing we deploy, what is the potential impact on this service level? Who will be impacted? What are the penalties for not being in compliance, right? Because that tell you what, it will drive root cause analysis, time to repair, service quality. Everybody's looking at the same thing, metrics, etc. And there's monetary value to that. Because if I can prove that I restore system in X amount of time and save this from being a compliance issue that potentially has penalty, it's much easier to talk and relate to how we provide service. So we have the whole IT has to be held accountable to deliver its service to its end users. And then vendors has to be held accountable for whatever product they tools or whatever solution that they deliver to the customer, the IT. Together, they have to be on this premise so that it's easy to improve service quality. Because at the end of the day, you want to improve service quality, but you're not going to do any of this unless there are clear, measurable, real-time data-driven type of service level management. Or if you go down to what we call operational level agreement, operational, you take that SLA, the legal thing, and you break it down. Oh, there's 5 measurable KPIs. How do I measure this? What tool do I use? How often should I report on it? And it should be in clear compliance, not after the fact. Even during healthy times, you can look at your metrics and saying, hey, everything's good, right? Or if it starts slipping, you start proactively managing it so that your bridge won't be like bad, that you will look bad even at the end of the month and you get the report. You should know that it's right now maybe in jeopardy of compliance issue. So I'm just saying that people who are in the audit, or if tax or they get audited by security, cybersecurity, they know what penalties are.
Yeah.
If you get audited and you get, I didn't file my tax, and the tax man's going after you. Same thing with security. Oh, you left the door open and you're vulnerable, you get slapped, right? Well, IT performance availability is the same thing, but they're generally not doing that. They are generally not doing that.
Yeah. So what kind so I had two questions. Number one, with KPIs and monitoring systems to ensure that you're fulfilling the SLAs instead of just a legal document. Is there a way to tie in predictive analytics to this so that if the indicators are not going in the right direction, it could predict, oh, well, I think that in about 3 hours we're going to have an outage. Let's do something about it now.
Yeah, that's always been the kind of projected goal, right? If you have enough data and you have enough machine learning and intelligence, and you have enough digital knowledge base of all the past incidents that has happened, it's easy to say and again, we can talk about like a query, maybe using AI, but you can query and say, give me all the past incidents involving this application having this symptom. It's just like a doctor. They use a database to say if the patients come in with these symptoms, what are the likely scenarios they've got this disease or this sickness, and if they have this and the symptoms are this bad, how likely are they going to encounter without some kind of remedy? How likely would they? Maybe they have 5 days, maybe have a week, or So they do this with patients, doctors, right? You go in and you go, oh man, your chest look bad, we prescribe more tests and now it looks even worse. So you have like 3 months to live. Yes, the news is not great, but the same thing with IT is like, if you can predict something, if you don't do anything now, in 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks or whatever, you will have this problem. And I go back to the story I start telling in the beginning of our conversation, that the same customer, believe it or not, I had an advisory role and I had actually proposed proactively fixing this issue of theirs. And there was proposal on the table for months, more than a month and a half. And they sat on it, right? And you know what? It was a ticking time bomb. It's amazing that when the situation happened, that sitting on the call and they were ready to actually do some of what I proposed live in production because they got desperate.
Yeah.
right? Let's just change this.
Yeah.
So when you talk about prediction, there are many symptoms. It doesn't have to be automated with like a tool only, but it can be a combination of process, the digital knowledge base that we use in IT services to capture automation, to capture a relationship, to capture data. This can drive, like, let's say you have a monthly review of your service and you review the data proactively with a team of experts. And they use this data to drive this conversation. Hey, I detect that there's going to be an issue in this area. You're going to run out of resources, storage or servers, or, you're going to have this problem. And so deal ahead with that. So proactively. IT today, unfortunately, are reactive. They tend to look like the hero to go fixing a problem, restore service, and then it happens again a month from now. So the future of IT need to go from reactive to, proactive. Of course, it's always harder to convince management to spend money on proactive stuff because it hasn't happened yet, right? So we have to
Yeah.
change its mindset. And the way to change the mindset is really use data-driven approach to say, hey, convincingly, these are the use cases. These are what happens if you have this kind of symptoms. These are going to happen if you don't do something about it. Proactively do that. You don't have to wait for something to happen because the impact is already like egg on your face. So I think we have to change. And I unfortunately, over 20, 30 years, I've been in the consulting business. Customers are still paying great money, even to me, to go fix a problem that could have been prevented. So we have to change his mindset. It's not all about tools or solutions and platforms. It's also part of the methodology and the philosophical approach.
Right. Yeah. The philosophical approach, the mindset, if you will, right? Yeah. So I just want to summarize again. So the steps for becoming a modern IT department for preparing for the future are: one, having a single source for the truth. Two was really having a solution forward approach as to opposed to just throwing more tools all the time at the problem. Number three, being able to have enforceable SLAs or SLAs where you can actually monitor and have KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
And then number four, what you just mentioned is having a proactive approach backed by data. So having a data
Mm-hmm.
first approach so that you can be more proactive and prevent expensive errors. Is there any more? Is there a fifth thing that you want to add to that, or good enough right there? Number four.
Yeah, I think I'm talking very general term. Obviously, when you go into each scenario, there may be a multitude more of detailed approaches. But when we talk about high level approach that could be applied to any type of shop, any type of IT customer, any type of enterprise, the size, I think what I mentioned is fairly clear. Because I mean, in my experience, I don't pick the size of customers that have the problem, right? They come from all sizes and shapes and all different parts of the world.
Yeah.
The common thread is there enough for me to recognize that they have to change. And unfortunately, again, with that mindset of companies that create solution based on people only billing, right? The problem there is that this problem will never go away. And until the customer put pressure, say, hey, I just don't want the lowest, who wants to say I got the lowest IT service provider out there? Is that something a CIO would be proud to go out and talk? Hey, I have the instead of saying the best, I got the lowest price IT service guys.
No.
I'm like, well, no, I have the best, highest quality solution provider.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yeah.
negotiate about the other areas of time and efficiency and quality people and all that, but you want the highest solution, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really where you need to start the conversation. Not and unfortunately today it's like how many bodies you going to throw at it and how much it's going to cost me. It's all
Yeah.
the wrong question, right?
Yeah.
It has to be like, what does the solution involve? How does the tooling help me centralize my data, use it proactively? Can I have management report dashboards giving me foresight and also giving me ability to fix issue when there's a problem and not just making things up? Just have the system spit out what the root cause is and have my analysts be on the same page, agree and move forward, right? We're all on the same team, regardless of when there's a problem. There is one thing that, when I say when a CIO gets on the call, he just want to do one thing, restore service. And all of the rest of you have no other job except to make him look good because he's looking bad right now, right?
Yeah.
And when I say things like KPI, SLA, really at the end of the day, everybody march the same beat and say, what do we need to do to make this better, so that we don't have some kind of issue with management and vendors and partners and customers, right? And that's really, from a CIO, that's what he cares about. And for sure, he's not, well, I don't know any CIO to go out there and say, hey, I have the cheapest solution provider I could get. Look how much I save. I'm like, the business, like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. That would
What
be,
kind of quality are we talking about here?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay, perfect. Well, I think this has been a really great episode, Lynn. I think that, really talking about the future of the IT department. And I think, there are companies out there that are already talking about how the IT department is going to be completely automated. I think ServiceNow is talking about that, and you're talking about that, and so, but it's just kind of, it's a process that all these, IT department, these data centers are going to have to start getting into. Like you said previously, only about 15% of data centers have migrated to the cloud, which is amazing, right? So
Yeah,
there's a lot of work to do.
they're
There's a
still
lot of work.
stuck. They're still
Yeah.
stuck, and maybe they're stuck because it's, again, it could be they inherited. It's too scary. It's too unknown, but
Mhm.
and then they're just hoping it will go away by itself. It almost never does, unless you close shop, you close business, you shut down part of that business that used the systems. Almost always, you're gonna have to spend time, money to upgrade your systems or migrate them, and you gotta pay a technical debt. So to me, IT has to budget this work in a way where, again, it increases the data-driven approach and then helps the process be more efficient. And anybody who talks about AI solving this stuff, I haven't seen no AI doing enterprise IT to solve daily operational stuff. Maybe in the future, 10 years from now, but humans are very much part of it, and humans make the decision. There is no enterprise IT shop I know of that lets some kind of intelligent automation shut down a system. They
Yeah.
want you to make the recommendation. They want, anything that helps as an assistant, right? And then there's still executive decision to say, oh yeah, okay, give me the data, give me the analysis, give me the proposal. I will make the decision. So we are far away from letting some bot going in and just slashing systems, right? And that's really the truth of that. I mean, there's no way anyone in charge of multi-billion-dollar corporations with IT that cost millions an hour in downtime, letting some bots in there and just making random decisions and doing that stuff. So I think that's why I'm excited about AI, but I don't think it's ready for real enterprise stuff. It may be for little menial task things like querying, and it should help you from a knowledge base, right? But at the end of the day, we're talking about decisions that should be made by human, because there are much more complex issues at play.
Yeah. 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 Perfect. Well, listen, Lane, thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom with the audience over here. I know that IT departments love to hear, what you're thinking about the future and solutions and automation. And so we will see everybody in the next episode of Linh Talks Tech. See you
Until
then.
next time.